Hey y'all. I know it has been, a couple weeks, if not a month, since my last podcast. And I do apologize for that. I wanted to be on top of it with recording and stuff, but I just, if I'm being completely honest, did not have the energy or the mental capacity or emotional capacity to sit there and really gather information and record a podcast and go through all it is that you have to go through when making a podcast episode, because you have to think of a topic, you have to come up with things to say, you have to record, edit, upload, make a description, all of that. And to be quite honest, I feel like my life has been a little of a whirlwind, definitely for a while now, but more so the past month or so. I've just had situations come up where I really needed time off of speaking, I guess, to really just sit in what I have going on. And I have pretty much stayed on top of vlogging in the process, but that's only because the vlogs that I've recorded were already recorded, and most of them were somewhat edited or just needed a little bit of editing to be pushed through the process and to go be ready to be uploaded. So with this podcast, I would have had to do the whole entire length of it, if that makes sense. So I'm finally back. I have been stepping up my game with content creation, but I do want to talk about this episode because I was actually editing a vlog that will be out in a couple of days, and it's about being your own advocate, and essentially the vlog kind of attached to it is a story time where I had a situation happen around the time of Pride and at Pride, where I was friends with people who unfortunately / fortunately I'm no longer friends with. The reason that I say unfortunately / fortunately is because I really did think that these people were my friends and they were my people, and come to realize after sitting back and reflecting on things, the friendship just wasn't meant to be. So I've kind of had to come to terms with that, and that's kind of why I want to talk about today's episode of being your own advocate, because in that vlog I had mentioned that I listened to Soph Mosca's Be Your Own Advocate podcast, and I'm sure Soph probably wanted to do more than just the medical aspect of things, and I think it's great that she included the medical aspect of things, but I kind of want to touch on how much in life you need to be your own advocate. It's not just, advocating for your mental health or your medical, disease if you have one. It's also just about advocating for your boundaries when it comes to new people, when it comes to friends, when it comes to relationships. Anytime we're setting a boundary, and I feel like I don't know how long ago, but I definitely had a podcast on boundaries. When we are setting boundaries, we are technically advocating for ourselves. So this really does go hand in hand, and I feel like a lot of my episodes try to go hand in hand with each other and build off of each other. So I think it's kind of cool that I'm finding topics that kind of intertwine and mesh, because I love when that happens. Like I said, this podcast is about mistakes that we make and how to overcome those mistakes and learn from them and do better. So I'm not going to touch too much on what happened at Pride because it's already a vlog. The only thing I really want to say is that if you feel like somebody is disrespecting you or your boundaries, and it's somebody that you've been friends with, try resetting those boundaries, like talking to that person. Try resetting those boundaries, and if they still do not respect those boundaries, then they are not respecting you, and that's when you need to know to cut off that friendship or relationship or whatever. Because if you are not setting boundaries and they're not respecting them, it's because you're not setting boundaries. But if you set them and someone's not respecting them, then you've already made it clear what your boundaries are. They just don't care, or whatever the reason is for them to not respect your boundaries. They either don't care, they don't think that there's going to be consequences, whatever the case may be. Like, make sure you're setting your boundaries. And another thing I want to say is, when setting your boundaries, try to be nice about it, because I know it's very hard to articulate, or at least for me personally, it's very hard for me to articulate or have conversations when I am already in a certain mood or emotion, or if I'm already quote unquote heated. But if you can set your boundaries and advocate for yourself as nicely as possible. And Soph kind of outlines this in her podcast, where, she stays stern in her boundaries, and she's not an a-hole about it, because she doesn't abuse her boundaries and she doesn't abuse her advocation. Because essentially, when you're advocating for yourself, you are trying to set a boundary so that somebody does not take advantage of you or take advantage of their position of power. There's many situations that can happen, and she kind of explained, like TSA or concert security, how she has to advocate for herself as a diabetic. So do I. So that's kind of why I get it. You have to advocate, like, hey, I have insulin, I have apple juice. And usually for me, I don't know if it's because we go about things differently, like Soph and I, but I always bring my pump with me. And my medical devices, I really don't have things that can't go in security, so I think it's a little bit different. But overall, like, usually the insulin pump process is pretty standard, and I just, bring my pump with me. I'm holding it up, scan it, whatever. It's usually not too much of a problem, and I never seem to have any sort of miscommunication or like beef. Let's just put it that way. Usually I'm able to kind of put everything in a clear bag, and the only issue that ever comes up is an apple juice, and I say, hey, I'm a type 1 diabetic, it is a closed apple juice, and usually it's fine and dandy. They just kind of mark it as a medical bag and move accordingly. But obviously not all venues are the same. Everyone has kind of different expectations, but I think that's kind of where Soph and I differ. I kind of don't carry a lot when it comes to my medical stuff, and I do leave stuff in the car, like extra apple juices. Sorry, my dogs decided to bark at whatever is outside. Like, I'll leave extra apple juices and low snacks in the car in addition to with me. And I also am one of the kind of girls that likes to go to the food stands, check out what's there to eat and drink and all that stuff. So, obviously there's going to be differences in every diabetic, but that's just kind of like one circumstance that I can see her point of view on, but also kind of add mine. But in terms of friendships and relationships, I kind of want to talk about what it means to be your own advocate and how to advocate for yourself and how to do it in a correct fashion. Now, obviously, I've kind of touched on this, but there have been past situations where I can look back and say, I didn't do that the best way or the way that I wish I would have, etc., etc. But essentially, what I'm going to do now that I have broke off the friendship with Eli and Z, due to the circumstances at Pride, I have decided that whatever friends I do meet, I'm going to set clear boundaries and expectations. It might be a little bit difficult for them to disrespect my boundaries because there's no girl code involved. Besides, I mean, there is girl code involved. Like, obviously, I'm dating somebody and I don't want you to flirt with or, like, disrespect me and my partner. But, like, I don't foresee my girlfriend and I breaking up. But if we were to, like, she would be off limits. And that's kind of a girl code that I would want if I make a future friend that does like women. That would be a girl code that, like, should usually be implied, but not everybody, I guess, I fear, gets that. So I'm gonna set clear boundaries and expectations with whatever friends I do meet by making sure that they understand I'm there for them whenever they need me, that I need communication, that I will try my best, but also to remind them and themselves, like, we're human adults and we don't always have to be hanging out 24/7. We probably won't, and that's okay. And if I don't talk to you for a certain period of time, it does not mean that I'm mad at you. It does not mean we're not friends. It just means, hey, I'm really going through it right now. Like, I'm going through life. And, you know, if you want to reach out to me, I will do my best. I will do my best to reach out to you. But I also feel like I'm going to move differently in friendships. I don't want to give myself too much to a friendship until I can recognize that this is a friend that is trustworthy, that is genuine, because you don't know people's intentions off the bat. Like, you need to have some time to get to know them, and I feel like I try to be very trusting in the beginning, and I don't know if that's what's best for me at this time because I don't want to be taken advantage of. So I need to kind of set the expectation that, like, you need to earn my trust and you need to earn, you know, I don't want to say certain aspects of the friendship, but I feel like I will gradually open up and gradually become a better friend in terms of, like, a closer friend, not, like, better as in, like, you know, better versus worse. Just better as in closer. Like, I will become a closer friend naturally instead of just, like, bearing out my all and giving you my all and telling you everything off the bat, because not everybody is trustworthy and not everybody deserves that of you. So I think that's where I'm probably going to move differently in friendships, because I definitely have learned from my mistakes and have learned that there are different types of people and not everybody is the same, but you need time to kind of differentiate that. Like, is this person unhealed and they're, like, trying to, like, disturb my peace, or is this person kind of up there vibrationally and that's somebody that I can grow with, and actually see and build a future with as, you know, possibly like an auntie or whatever. I mean, I don't really plan on having kids, but maybe they do. And, like, I want those, like, barbecue cookouts in the backyard and those game nights, and, like, I imagine these things for myself that I didn't really think wouldn't be there for me at 27, but I'm realizing that I have to rely on myself, and that, you know, it's okay to let people in and it's okay to trust people. However, at the end of the day, I am the only person that has my back. I am the only person that is obligated to me. And while we're kind of in this era of where people don't really owe anyone anything. They don't owe an explanation. They don't owe a friendship. I've kind of realized that a lot of people act that way, so I need to trust and rely on myself and trust that my instincts and my intuition are on point, and if I feel uncomfortable with something, I need to speak up about that and advocate for myself, and I need to do that in a very nice kind of tone and manner, and when I do communicate it, I need to be in the form of like, hey, this really upset me, can we talk about it? Because I'm the type of person that will definitely give like first, second, third chances, but at the same time, it depends on what it is. Because if it's something serious and I constantly feel disrespected, that is not someone I want to be friends with. I don't want to be friends with somebody who's comfortable with disrespecting me or comfortable with tearing down my boundaries and doing it in front of my face. Like, I want to be friends with somebody who I don't feel like is trying to compete with me, who I feel like just wants to be my friend because they think I'm cool. Like, I want to be friends with this person because I think they're cool and they make me happy and they make me laugh and they make me smile, and I can't wait until I see them get married and have kids and do the things that they want to do, and I can root for them. Like, that is the type of friendship that I want, and that is the kind of sacred bond that I want in my life, but I want it here and not just in Connecticut, where I don't know if I'm ever going to go back to Connecticut, quite frankly. If I'm being honest, like, I'm probably not going to stay in Texas, but I might move. So with that possibility up in the air, obviously it would suck to make friends with somebody in Texas and then have to leave them. But at the same time, I feel like a friend that is rooting you on is going to root you on as long as you're going in the right direction. And if you're not going in the right direction, they're going to tell you and be honest with you. But a real friend is going to root you on as much as they can, and in every positive circumstance, let's put it that way. Because if I am like falling backwards and like going out and drinking and getting addicted to alcohol or drugs or whatever, I don't want somebody rooting me on to do that. I don't. It's not it for me. You know, that's not the lifestyle I want. That's not the lifestyle I'm choosing. That's not the lifestyle I want to choose. I want to be somebody who just gets through life and gets through it and works hard to accomplish the things that I want to accomplish. And kind of, I guess with that being said, I have pretty standard, realistic goals. You know, I want to be happy. I want to buy a house. I want to get married. I want to grow old with the same person. I don't want to get divorced. I want kind of the simple things in life, but I also, like, it would be cool to, like, you know, have a different job, do something with content creation more often. I have other goals, right? But I have very simplistic goals. I have a very ideal, simplistic, end of life kind of goal. And I feel like with that being said, like, it's easy to know what direction I'm going in, or want to go in. So I want to find my people that support that and support me as a person. And if I was running a marathon, I want them, I mean, let's be honest, I'm never going to be running a marathon, but let's just say I am. I want them to support me and tell me that I can do it, because I'm going to bring this up as an example of a friend that is secretly a hater. And I hate to say this because I don't want to be drama-ing my podcast, but I feel like this needs to be brought up in a form of advocating for yourself and realizing in friendships how to do so, and in realizing who you need to do that with. So I had an Instagram poll where I had bought some books and I was like, my goal is to read 12 books this year. Everyone except for Z voted that I could do it. And I'm pretty sure I have that screenshot saved to this day as a reminder that this was foreshadowed, as fucked up as it is, because I feel like I was friends with somebody who wasn't rooting for me, and I tried to make that friendship work when it shouldn't have worked to begin with. Here it is. So it says, my reading goal is to read 12 books this year. 96% said hell yeah. 4% was, you read like 2 books in 2023. That's a stretch. And then I took a screenshot of the one person, which is Z, who said, you read like 2 books in 2023. That's a stretch. And while I get it, I put that as a poll option. However, it goes to show that even something as simple to root for me as reading 12 books was not something she wanted for me. And I felt like if you are a real friend, you are going to root for them to do good things. And reading 12 books is not a bad thing. So why is it that you voted against it and you're voting against, like, you have no faith in me? So that's kind of why another reason why I ended that friendship. But it goes to show that, like, on top of advocating for yourself in the correct form, you need to make sure you're even advocating with the correct people. You need to make sure that whoever you're advocating for yourself for, that they're actually listening to you and will respect that. And if they don't, that's fine, but that just goes to show you don't need to be a part of it. So when you are, in a TSA line or going to a concert in security, that's like an exchange that you're probably never going to have with that specific person again. However, with friends, it's an ongoing, I need to advocate for myself. But the thing is with real friends, with friends who want to be your friend, you're not going to have to advocate for the same thing over and over again. It should be once. Sometimes, you have different ways of thinking, so maybe you have to advocate for yourself on something a second time. But if you see a pattern of having to advocate for the same thing, or you see a pattern that they do something over and over, you need to figure out if that friendship is worth it to you, because it might not be what's best for you. Every time you close a door, something better, another door that's better, opens for you. So I promise you, what doesn't work for you really will work for you, or really does work for you. The doggos went cray-cray again. But anyway, what doesn't work out for you really does work out for you in the end. And I just kind of want to do a recap. So essentially, you're always going to need to advocate for yourself. And when it comes to strangers, like, you're going to have to say the same thing over and over again to a different person. And it can get tiring, but at the end of the day, your boundaries are your boundaries. So whatever it is that you set and whatever it is that you're advocating for, keep pushing through it, because it's important to you, and you're going to keep pushing because it is important to you. But when it comes to friends, family, and relationships and people that stay longer in your life, if you are advocating more than twice, 3 times if they're stupid, that's a problem. Because at the end of the day, if you're advocating and setting boundaries and you're doing the same boundary with the same person over and over again, they're not respecting it for a reason. Whether it be they don't care, whether it be they don't think there's consequences, whether, I don't know, those are just common examples is that they don't care, or they don't think that there's going to be consequences, or they don't value you. You need to evaluate essentially who's on the other end, because it shouldn't be hard to set boundaries and advocate for yourself. And if it is hard, you need to evaluate who is on the receiving end of that advocation and of that boundary, because maybe they're the problem. I know that with boundaries, sometimes the setter can be the problem, because maybe they're not setting it correctly. Maybe they thought they set it when they really didn't. There's many cases with that, and I kind of talk about that in the Boundaries podcast. But think about how you're setting your boundary, and think about who is on the receiving end, because at the end of the day, your people will not disrespect your boundaries, and your people will be your people and will root for you because they're meant to be in your life. And if they're not meant to be in your life, you'll know, because a falling out will happen. You'll go through some shit, you'll have a healing era, you'll learn stuff. You learn from your mistakes, and you keep going until you find what's meant for you, because what's meant for you is going to just come. You're not going to have to try so hard. And I will speak to that till the end of the day. Like I said, Larissa being my girlfriend was not hard. It was just natural. It was effortless. It flowed. Jessie being my best friend, that came so naturally. We were just there for each other. It was like this unspoken bond. And yes, we've definitely had our challenges. Like, I've had my challenges with the people in my life, but I feel like we're all kind of challenged in our friendships, in relationships, to see if they're meant to last. And I try my best to be a decent, good human being, and I know that there are other people out there that are just trying to do the same thing. So when you are advocating for yourself, keep in mind of who's on the receiving end. Keep in mind the words that you're using, the tone that you're using. There's so many types of boundaries and advocations. I don't even know if that's a word. I just keep using it. But essentially, like, let's say you're saying, like, hey, I don't like that. Hey, don't do that. Like, there's a way to speak to someone. There's a way not to speak to somebody. So, again, keep in mind what you're saying, how you're saying it, but also who is on the receiving end, because that is just as important. I really don't know what else to say other than to keep drilling the same things in y'all's heads. So if you have any questions about advocating for yourself, and how to do it, I feel like I kind of, went into it, but it really is hard to say how to advocate for yourself, other than, like, just think of what you want to say before you say it. Think of what boundary you want to have before you state it. Think ahead is kind of the biggest part, but also just know that whoever is on the receiving end of that, if they don't receive it well, that is a red flag or a beige flag, depending on what that boundary is. Because if it's a clear boundary, it's a red flag. If it's you might need to word that differently. Maybe the person isn't receiving it. That might be a beige. Maybe you guys have different ways of thinking. Maybe it's a communication issue. But overall, setting boundaries usually is not a hard thing and should not be hard when it comes to the act of it. Obviously, I think a lot of us work ourselves up to setting boundaries as being hard because we're scared that the other person might not want to be our friends after, but that is also a red flag, because if we're trying to set a boundary and somebody doesn't accept that, yikes, because why is it that, like, if it's a reasonable boundary, like, don't flirt with my girlfriend or something like that, I don't know, that's just the first one that came into my head. Like, if that's a boundary that they're not respecting, that's a big yikes, you know what I mean? So just kind of keep all of those aspects in mind. I, however, am going to go because this episode has been ADHD enough. I feel like I've gone back and forth and reiterated the same thing a couple of times, and I don't want to kind of talk y'all's ears off with the same thing. I just want y'all to know that it is very important to advocate for yourself, and it is very important to set boundaries ASAP, because one thing I've noticed is I have been horrible with setting boundaries in the past, and because of that, it is harder to set boundaries in the middle of a friendship than it is in the beginning, and as well as with relationships. With family, they kind of see you grow, so they're going to be thrown off if you set new boundaries, but it's family, so that's a whole other story. If you know me personally, you know that I feel that family is not... It's important, but like your extended family and stuff, if they don't agree with you or they don't agree with your boundaries, it's okay not to speak to them. My mom and my stepdad and my brother are all I need in this life when it comes to family. So as long as I can communicate with them and have boundaries with them and they accept it, that's all I really care about. But I know that everybody's family is different. Everybody is different on how they view family and how they view their type of relationship with their family members. So I'm not going to speak too much on that. However, I'm going to skedaddle out of here and let this episode be done with, because again, I just feel like my brain has gone crazy with this episode because I did not take notes, and I really just wanted to talk about what's been going through my life and going through my mind and what I want to do differently. So I hope that this advice sees you well and that you now have advice on how to set boundaries with certain people in your life. Maybe you realized you need to cut somebody off in your life. Maybe you realize that you haven't set boundaries with somebody in your life. Maybe you realize that you need to advocate for yourself more. If you want like tips and tricks, maybe I'll come up with a tips and tricks episode if people are interested in that. I have no idea. But until next time, I will see you on next episode of Many Mistakes Ago, which I forget what the episode is. Hold up. Give me like 2 shakes of a second. Let me go into my Google Drive. I think I know what the podcast episode is because I flipped it, but I just want to know. Okay. The next episode is about falling in love with yourself and your soulmate. So I will kind of draw in boundaries again and advocating for yourself again. Again, I feel like all of my episodes kind of tie together, just even if it's a little bit, but falling in love with yourself and falling in love with your soulmate. This is about like finding yourself and how to fall in love with yourself. So stay tuned for that on next week's episode. I love you guys so much. Thank you for supporting me. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your support, your love, your care, your time, everything. I love and appreciate it so much. So I will see you guys next time. Thank you.